that in
We're recording now, Geoff.
I know. Well, I'm going to go with this one anyway. That in the vein of Princess Bride, that word doesn't mean what I think you think it means. I'm just going to leave it at that.
All right, well, let's go. Geoff, welcome to the podcast. Mime is Money. I would like to proceed now. I've got Josh and Geoff back again for popular demand. How we doing?
Popular demand of 1 or 2 or 3, because we both said that the 3 of us said we were going to do a podcast. It's been a while. Speaking of a while, John, how long has it been since the 3 of us were together to discuss everything related to enterprise tech and SAP? Do you know?
So yeah, I think we're looking at about 6 months. We had we had some
Really?
we had some
ASUG
Talks discussions in the meantime, and those are still available on ASUG Talks as well as my channel. And we're going to do another one of those at the ASUG Annual Conference, aka Sapphire. So if you're there, come join us for some live Ask Us Anything.
Yeah.
But, in Orlando, May 11th through the 13th, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, coming at us very fast.
Right. And so we're not actually going to do an event preview type of podcast, that we may talk a little bit about that towards the end. But anyway, so this is more of a free-flowing, anything goes format that we haven't done in a while, but I think we will accelerate the pace in the next couple months around the show, before and after. There's a lot to talk about. Ordinarily, I would shift directly into some quick banter with you all, but I have something a little different in mind. I want to say a couple things, but we will get into some things like the Reltio acquisition, a little bit of board movement, but mostly just want to hit on whatever we think matters to customers. But I just wanted to share with you, because I think there's so much going on right now with the ERP landscape as a whole. Some big layoff news from one of SAP's main competitors hit the wires today. There's so much going on with the supposed impact of AI on all of that, one way or the other. And when I step back, I kind of think about it in terms of SAP, I think in the long run wants to be a transformation partner to its customers, not a back office data repository. And not only that, they're going to want to own some of the user experience, because if they don't, then some other vendor might. So, can SAP do that? Can they deliver on the long game of that? Right now, the markets aren't cooperating with that, and that creates a lot of tension. AI bills are starting to come due amidst data center build-outs and build-out cutbacks, and adoption's real, but I think the stakes are really high. And in the middle of all this, we have human beings. We have lives and careers in a pinball machine right now, it feels like sometimes. And Geoff, you brought this up in your interview with Christian Klein. You talked about, is AI going to help me do my job better, or am I going to have a job? And and when I think about it from a customer perspective, I think about like, yeah, you're going to need an AI strategy, but isn't the problem a little bit deeper? Isn't it about how to be more resilient, more adaptive, maybe have more intelligent systems, if you want to call it that help you manage risk, change business models, cope with all the global volatility? And so the question becomes, should I believe some of the hype that startups can help me with this, or can SAP do it? And if SAP can help me with this, do I need to migrate to do it? Do I need the public cloud to do it? And this isn't like me being goofy. This is all impacting markets and stock price. And I remember telling an SAP executive, I think, if you can stick with this, you might do pretty well, but there's so much at stake. And then in the middle of that, like ASUG, the role of ASUG, user education, change. And one of the things I'm baffled by is how a typical person working for an SAP project can cope with all the noise and make sense of what's real and what delivers value versus just the market noise that we're dealing with right now. I mean, I chase down these rabbit holes all the time, but that's what I do for a living. How do you do that when you have a day job of managing a complex global project? I think it's just really difficult right now. And so hopefully the two of you are going to bring some sanity to this discussion, help me to make sense of it all. Welcome. What do you want to talk about?
I'm baffled or stunned by that whole preamble, John. I don't know whether to jump up and down for joy and say this is amazing, or to run away in horror with just kind of all the things you threw on the table. Isn't it these are the best of times, these are the worst of times? Is that where you're going with this?
Yeah, you remember how that book ended? Someone got their head cut off. So
Well, I think I'm going in a little bit of a different direction than that, which is I'm going to make the case. I don't know if these are the best or the worst of times, or some, god awful combination, or whatever. But I think where I'm coming at it is more, that I think these are proactive times. These are times where you need a plan for yourself. You need a plan for the people you care about. You need a plan for your company and your industry. And even with all of that, maybe it will be incredibly challenging. But I'm interested in equipping people with something they can use. And that's why I'm drawn back and back to these conversations, because I don't know about you, but I listen to a lot of discussions like this to try to make sense. I mean, prior to this recording, I listened to 7 ASUG Talks podcasts, which I'm going to be sprinkling into this discussion. But the point is, those kinds of things I think are incredibly useful for people who are trying to figure out, like, okay, what does this all mean? Like, is this a real advancement? Is this going to help me, like you said, to do my job better, or am I in a tough spot? Like, and in the SAP context, like, how strategic is my work in SAP, and how can I make it matter? And also, can I find some purpose and fulfillment in all of this? I don't want to lose track of that. I feel like so much of what we're doing right now is coping with chaos, and yet I think at the heart of a good life is rewarding relationships and solving problems that matter to people. And, like, I know that we've experienced this working with each other, and we have some cool stuff coming up with more workshops of the business case that we're going to do with ASUG and ASUG customers. So that's great. But where are we going from here? And I think I just wanted to throw it all out there to see where the two of you want to take this.
You want to go first, Geoff? This guy is just teed up. I literally made a whole bunch of notes last night about this, and you hit pretty much every single thing I wrote down. It's kind of.
I think. Let me try. And I might foul out or just hit a ground ball to first, but I'm certainly not going to make it through the baseball season to second base and third base, and certainly not home. I think if you take all those comments as you presented them, Jon, in its totality, it's overwhelming, right? There's so much happening, whether you talk about the world of tech, the world of corporate America, organizations, professional career, international tensions, volatility. I mean, it's a big basket of things to navigate. And so, and you and I and Josh think about these all the time. And I wish I had more succinct advice for the folks listening. I try to kind of break this down into more manageable chunks. Let me take one of these threads and try to get my brain wrapped around it. And then I can move on to the next. Because short of that, it just all feeds on each other, and you throw your hands up and you go, I don't know what to make of this. But the world is moving faster than we've ever seen. I mean, that sounds trite, and we've said that as a cliche before. And I don't want it to be a cliche, because I think it's actually true. I got to a point with all these AI tools that I was like, I can't just keep sitting here and just standing on the sidelines, talking about them. Let me actually get in and open the hood and actually take some of this stuff for a test drive. And I've been both pleasantly surprised and terrified all at the same time. And as a CIO, right, where do we go with all of this? I mean, the appetite the thirst is unquenchable. The appetite is unfulfilling, right? I mean, and that I think is technology is just going to eat everything in its path, or something else is going to happen to disrupt it. But as the way it goes right now, I mean, there was an article in the New York Times recently, right, that the amount of code that's being generated is growing exponentially. The Big Bang, AI has created a code overload. Check. I agree with that, right? And I think the notion that all of these tech jobs are just going to go away because AI will eat it, I think is overblown. I think the jobs are going to be very different. Do I understand completely what that different is at this point? I don't, but I think they'll be very different. I think we as enterprise technologists will play a vastly different role. Let me just pause there. Otherwise, I'm going to go talking for 15 minutes. Josh, back to you.
Well, so, right. I mean, Jon really he didn't just lob us, a pitch to continue the baseball metaphor. He set up the pitching machine and just put it on.
So set up 4 pitching machines and say, try to hit one of these balls.
So, I think I want to start with where you started, which is that this is, complexity and chaos are the norm now. I saw a term come up more than once, the omni crisis. And it's like, yeah, it's like pick a moment in time in the last 3 months when something hasn't pivoted to something else that we couldn't anticipate. So, and this is sort of maybe turn this a little bit, pivot this so directly into what John started out by saying as well. Is there's too much going on in a way, and too much for the customer to handle. And I think this is one of the big criticisms I have of how SAP presents itself, and yet it's the opportunity SAP is genuinely presenting. Is there's so much value SAP can bring to its customers, so much SAP can do across now this whole continuum of intimate user experience down to really nerdy data management and quality. But the problem is there's too many paths to value, too many ways for the customer to engage, and too many ways in which SAP would like to engage. So I think one of our jobs, maybe we can try to do this today, is to sort of say, okay, where do we start? Where do you as a customer start to put your head around this omni-crisis mentality, this, what John said, this, and I agree. The problem is about being resilient, about solving the problems in front of you, not necessarily throwing someone's version of technology in front of your problem, but putting your problem first and seeing which technology will fit. And so I'm gonna ground this real fast because let's get started in reality. I think one of the things I'm really excited about for the SAP customer in 2026 is that more and more SAP is really carving a path to innovation and a path to value for the ECC customer that allows them to have access to a lot of the strategic new stuff that SAP is doing. And that to me, so in a funny way, if I had to say, the customer came to me and said, what is the one thing I really need to know the most about to really succeed in the SAP world? And I'm a legacy customer, I'm an ECC customer. My answer would be BTP. Because if you look at how applications have been replatformed on BTP, like Ariba and and supply chain optimization, if you look at how obviously BTP is a place for integration and orchestration. If you look at how BTP has become how SAP defines industry value and the industry specific functionality that it's delivering, these are all, and of course AI, don't forget that. These are all the ways in which customers at least can start consume what SAP is offering by getting a hold of what is under the umbrella of BTP and moving forward. Because inside that massive umbrella are some really great ways to solve these problems. Again, whether you start down at the data excellence, data quality part of the equation, whether you go right to the front end with the user, with this intimate user experience that Joule and agentic AI is supposed to provide, anywhere in that continuum, if you're doing your job as a customer and really being smart about defining what your business problems are and what your business opportunities are, there's something in there for you.
Hey, Geoff, can I?
Yeah, and no, the problem is you got to be careful how to choose it because there's too much to consume.
Geoff, can I get in there for a second? Then I'll turn it over to you again. I wanted to comment on that in two capacities. One is that a lot of executives at companies, the higher leadership, are moving fast and breaking things with AI because they don't understand the technology properly. And this is happening at a global scale at companies, for example, Walmart, which had to roll back its OpenAI agentic commerce initiative in favor of its own chatbot. I forgot the name of Walmart's chatbot. What is it, Sparky or whatever? But the point is, OpenAI didn't have proper access to inventory levels and all the things that you need if you're a serious e-commerce shopper. And yet they rolled this out and they got egg on their face in front of their own customers. And I believe that example is the norm, not the exception. Because while you can debate how effectively AI works for coding, it translates even more poorly to other areas where you need proper use case design and you need better data. Enter SAP. Now, we can have a long talk about the advancements in context and what that means, but essentially, better data leads to better AI. That's the simple version of it. And from an ECC perspective, this is really interesting because I was on a podcast recently with someone who I consider something of an SAP critic, and they were challenging me on what SAP should be doing with these folks on older releases with looming maintenance deadlines. And I said, forget about the lift and shift upgrade march and go into those customers and say, you want to innovate with SAP? We're going to do it right now. We're going to do it with BTP. We're going to do it with our own AI and data platform, like Josh said, and we're going to build stuff together and we're going to be an innovation partner to you. The podcast host was really surprised because I think a lot of people don't realize that that's absolutely within SAP's power to do that. There's no technical barrier there. Okay, granted, if you're running a public cloud SAP product, you're probably going to be able to absorb more Joule stuff more easily, of course. But the point is, you can start now. And the whole point is, if you set a tone with me that you're my innovation partner around AI because you do a great job with my data and I trust you, well, then I think the sky's the limit because then you're going to be more likely to want to invest in big global upgrades. And so I think it's a really interesting thing. And to Josh's point, I think SAP is starting to realize this. I don't hear as much about it as I would like, but I am seeing changes.
So a couple of things that I think about. Number one is the promise of all of this is immense. The reality is that we still have a lot of work to do to get to the promise. We had maybe 30 or 40 executives together 2 weeks-ish or so ago to do an AI symposium as part of the ASUG Executive Exchange cohort. We actually sat many of them down and said, today you're going to build an agent. Most of them had never built an agent before. They had talked about it. This is back to Jon, some of your points. They talked about it. They'd intellectualized it. They'd philosophized about it. They actually hadn't done it. So we said, you're going to use Joule and we're going to run you through this exercise. It was kind of a disaster for a lot of different reasons. But it was instructive at the same time. And I think the light bulb that went off in many of these executives' heads was, oh gosh, this is harder than it actually seems, right? That I can't just sit here. I mean, when you say, okay, now open up this web page and write the title of the agent and now write a page of instructions. Most of them didn't know what to write. It was a foreign thing. Well, what am I going to instruct this agent to do? How do I know that that instruction is comprehensive? How do I know that that instruction is accurate? What if it misinterprets that instruction? What if that instruction is now being run 7,000 times a day by 200, 300, 400 different people who also don't know what they're doing? How does that work? So it turned on a lot of light bulbs. But the fact of the matter remains is we can get a lot of interesting computing done, writing far fewer instructions that we write, right, than have ever been written before. One of the things that's very interesting to me about all of this is we can talk about AI, we can abstract this all down, but these are still servers running Unix, servers running other operating systems that run into permission problems, where daemons aren't running correctly, where jobs don't fire in the right sequence or at the right time, right? So some of the things that AI tends to pepper over, after you use it for a little bit, you start to go, oh, some of that root cause problem is still very much alive and hasn't been figured out. So we can write code faster than we've ever written before. We're still beholden to the machines that are running it. And they're still written at a very different era. So I think all of that pretends that, well, I think we are probably behind. We're not as behind as we might think we are, but we can't just sit around on our laurels because people will get ahead of us and they'll keep going. And those of us that are behind, back to your ECC point, Jon, I really am very fearful that you will be further and further behind if you don't take proactive steps to modernize your architecture while all this new technology is being layered on top of it. It's like walking into a house that's an absolute mess that your teenage kids have been hanging out in all weekend. You went away for the weekend and you walk in the house and the pillows are everywhere. There's stuff all over the floor. No one's put the dishes away in the sink. If we don't get back to some structure, right? And what's the first thing you do as a parent? You want to go, nope, clean this whole thing up before we can move forward. I think we end up in a situation where we just can't get ahead because there's just so much crud holding us down, which I think is the business case for more than ever. The S4 business case comes to that.
Right. And to your point, Geoff, in these older ECC instances, especially if they're heavily customized, which they very often are.
They are, right.
You're not getting good AI at scale out of those systems, period. I don't care whether it's SAP or any cool vendor that you think might be able to alleviate your pain. Yes, on a small scale in a certain area, yes, but not at scale. You're not getting it unless you do that work. And
Not if your data's a
And the
mess.
same
You're
goes for
spot on.
analytics too. And
Yeah.
Josh, I wanted to run this by you because I think this is interesting, which Geoff, I think like using agents and getting used to them is interesting. And I talked with a finance leader who was able to compare their enterprise finance, which was very relatively accurate and useful to them versus building their own agent to build a spreadsheet on weekends using OpenClaw, which completely fell down and did not work. So I think it's instructive if you, especially if you can compare the two and see. But I think there's a bigger picture here, which is this AI readiness thing. And I think this indicative of the situation is the PepsiCo podcast on ASUG Talks, which is a BDC story. But basically, they were using all these multiple BW instances, and they're bringing them together on one BDC instance, and they're talking about their anticipation in the podcast because they're going to be able to connect success factors in for people intelligence dashboards. And then after that, they're going to do IBP. So they're going to have all the integrated business planning. And then they're going to use some enterprise data foundation stuff for more. So they have all these plans. And yet I think that's also indicative of the situation, right? That's where they're at. The key thing is that AI readiness is a thing. And if you can do it while getting some benefit through these things like people intelligence and IBP and such, like in the long run, you're moving towards AI. And it may not feel like you're moving fast enough, but that's actually the work you need to do. And Josh, I would love to hear your viewpoint on that.
Well, I wrote down sort of what I call 3.5 big stories for 2026. And number 2 was data excellence. And number 2 was this whole concept of everything you do towards innovation, which was my first one, innovation for ECC, as I said earlier. Everything you do towards that is going to have to go via this data excellence pathway. And I 100% agree with you. And in fact, it's very exciting for me to sort of think of that particular kind of use case because, traversing these realms of analytics, of getting it to be IBP, which is, business planning is an AI function by definition. You just didn't think of it that way, when we first used those terms. You're actually going to face, if you're doing old school IBP, and it's kind of old school now, they now have, supply chain optimization is a new kid on the block, but you've already run into the data problem. You've already run into this data excellence requirement. So I think I'm really excited about that. I think, when you look at some of what SAP's been doing with partnerships, with and Reltio, this new acquisition, they're marching directly towards that same capability with the customer. We're going to make it easy, I hope, functional, definitely comprehensive, ideally, to do this on the data side, and everything you do in the data side supports every innovation, including AI, but not just AI. And that's really important as well.
But doesn't the Reltio acquisition underline this whole conversation we've been having, Josh, about data, right? About your data house has to be in order. If your data house is a mess and you're not employing good master data management, skills, hygiene, the rest of this gets very, very shaky. And so I think that is absolutely to your point. I'm going to make another kind of point to both of you. Every time we go and we ask our membership and ask the 150,000 SAP professionals in North America, are you spending enough time innovating? The answer comes back, no, they're spending 80% of their time keeping the lights on. And I think now more than ever, a day a week, 20% of your time, if you really want to get out in front of this, should be spent in experimentation, knowledge acquisition, actually trying to put some of these tools to use, opening yourself up to skunkwork projects where you're going to try something and likely fail, but that failure will be instructive to you. We as a technology community, as an SAP community, need to experiment more and be able to understand how some of these modern tools may help. So if we're not running Joule today, go grab and spend some time, in Joule. Do some experimentation. BTP, Josh, you pointed it out. Use these tools, understand, and try to formulate an opinion about how these tools will inform your modern enterprise architectures and landscapes. Otherwise, your competitors will do it, and they'll get out way in front of you, and you will never catch up.
I want to riff on that one thing that you just said, because you're right. Everyone says we're spending 80% of the time keeping the lights on. I want to challenge that number, not because it's wrong, because it's not, but because some of what underlies that is fear of change and fear of change management, and an inability to look at these what we're doing with whether these lights we're keeping on are even the right lights at all. And I think that the ability of companies to, I said there's too many paths to value, and it's too complicated on the inbound side. On the internal side, it's also a problem of we don't really know how to manage change. So I
Oh,
think
no, that's absolutely
this
true.
this idea that we keep the lights on is often, John and I have had we've all had these conversations. Why are they keeping the lights on? Because I can't get my users to, give up on this old stuff because change management. So I think the challenge is also not just to play in the innovation sandbox that you have available to you, but also really look at how do you architect change at a human level in your organization and make that a rewarding experience and not just something people.
Let me take that a little further real quick, because as per ASUG Talks recent episodes on S/4HANA migrations, change management
He do when he does it to us.
is the top defining success issue that I think you've pointed out. But I want to take it a little bit further, though. I'm going to make a bigger argument, which is, even in a change management context, it hasn't gone far enough historically, maybe far enough to implement a semi-useful transactional ERP system, but not for the kind of true enterprise collaboration that the three of us would like to see before we retire. And I'm going to make the argument that AI and the data platform needs of AI is forcing a human collaboration issue that's been buried, that is now front and center in this change process. And that we don't talk to each other enough inside of our fiefdoms, inside of organizations. And you're not going to achieve any kind of data and, AI success at scale without those human changes. So I think it's a fascinating time for the reasons that you just described.
Well, so back to what Josh said a few moments ago, John, and double clicking on your comments. Internally at ASUG, we kicked off a few weeks ago an internal AI group focused on what are our AI standards, what are our adoption, doing exactly what I'm saying here today, experimenting with these tools, trying things out, going in new directions. And as the CEO, I was really fired up about this. I was excited that we were actually taking some important steps to bring a small group of people together and say, we're going to give you things that we wouldn't give to the rest of the org because we want you to experiment. I was disappointed that that group didn't have a broader excitement about it. Now, we did it. We did it as a remote conversation. We should have done it in person. We didn't. So I think that was part of it. But I was expecting this group of people to go, oh, yeah, give me those tools. Let me go figure some of this stuff out that's been just dogging me for a long period of time. I'm in. I can use this cohort to help drive great enterprise value and value for ASUG members. And instead, I got a blank stares like, what? What do we, huh? I don't even know where to start. And that comes back to Josh's change management challenge, right? That, these tools are all out there for those who want to take them. But I still think there's a huge group of people inside of our community who are like, whoa, not me. I don't know what this is. And backpedal away, not run towards. We got to figure out how to get those people engaged.
I feel if you push on this, you're going to get there, Geoff. And I think it's this culture of experimentation is really the key. And where companies are going wrong is when they try to enforce use of these tools in a fear-based capacity that has people running for cover for their jobs. And when I talk with customers in the last 6 months, I've been struck by the ones that I felt were the most effective, were the ones where the leaders had a clear philosophy, not just about AI, but how they were going to treat their people. This did not mean necessarily that I always agreed with them. There were some that were a little more aggressive about operational efficiency and headcount reduction, whereas I like to see a little more emphasis on growth and upskilling and things like that. But what they all had in common is they had a coherent, repeatable, understandable approach that their employees could rally around and understand how they fit in. And I think it's just a challenge now because, Geoff, to your point, we're not used to that. We're not used to being communicated with like that around our future. And I think it takes a while sometimes for people to embrace it, but in general, I think that's what I want to see inside of organizations is a chance to set a different tone. But if you're not careful, you will drive people into fear mode
Yeah.
on this topic.
I think of AI, John, as this massive boulder rolling down a hill, right? And it's gathering steam as it goes, and it's got AI painted on it, right? And we as the community are out in front of this boulder. We're all over the hill. We can either start running to keep ahead of this boulder or let the boulder flatten us and roll over us. I prefer to run ahead of it, knowing that I want to try to outrun this thing or at least stay a couple feet ahead of it. But there might be a certain percentage of our community that gets run over by it. That's your choice, right? I think it's the boulder's rolling. How do we as a community want to respond to it? I inside of ASUG, I have no interest in using AI as a mechanism to reduce headcount. I'm hopeful we can use it as a mechanism to increase quality, do more with the products and services that we offer to this SAP community at a higher degree of value to them than we ever have before, because we're not stuck in the basic operating mode of getting stuff done. We can elevate. So I'm hopeful that my team elevates and we perform at an elevated level.
I want to comment on the boulder metaphor because I think you're right, but I think that, there's so much hype around this. There's almost a performance anxiety thing going
Oh,
on.
I agree with you. I mean, it's
I was just, SAP, one of the SAP divisions, I'm not going to name names, just had a little analyst thing. We were talking about some of the new AI stuff, and they put out these numbers: 6x improvement in this metric, 2x in that one, 50% more, 75% less, and these numbers look so incredible until you ask the hard question: what was the baseline that 6x was improving on? And the answer was some
I don't know.
thing that we didn't. It was so. I think part of the other problem is that, and there's this perception that it's always going to be a boulder that's going to run you down, and frankly, I'm saying some of this, some of what's really, you guys know me well. I'm sort of like I'm making maybe too much of this in my recent career of the anti-hype guy with AI, but I look at the genuine problems of that John started out. The problems of resilience, the problems we need to sort of tackling this omni-crisis. And AI first is not the solution, in my opinion.
It's a tool.
Business process first is solution. Change management first is the solution. AI, if it works for you to fix those problems, but so much of what we need to do is literally dig that goddamn, tanker out of the mud in the Suez Canal. That's the level of stuff we are looking at in so many organizations in terms of process innovation. And AI is four hills with rolling boulders beyond fixing that problem first.
But John, to your point, and Josh, to your point, AI is a tool. It is a tool that you employ to accomplish a business outcome. It's not a solution.
If it can even do that, yeah.
But it's a tool, right? It's no different than a hammer or a screwdriver, a mallet, whatever, right? It's a tool that gets you to get to an outcome. Building a house. In order to build a house, I need tools. Hopefully, I have a blueprint that I'm following to build that house, right? So to me, where I think we get sometimes lost, I see AI as a tool, and it is a tool that you employ to drive an outcome. That tool also requires people, process, technology, right? It is a tool that helps drive the technology and the process piece. It's not going to do the people.
Well, if you're going to do a tool analogy, I would say it's a jackhammer. And I would say if you're going to use your friggin' jackhammer all the time instead of a real regular hammer, you're going to run a huge friggin' electric bill. You're going to pose danger to yourself and your colleagues at times.
We haven't touched
proper risk management, and you probably don't have the right experts to tell you how to use a tool in the first place. So I think the tool analogy is good, and yet you need to be aware that some of the tools that don't seem very sexy right now are still really impressive. One of the best sessions I attended this year was a workflow automation session that was standing room only that had no discussion of AI. It was all about business rules automation because people wanted to set up deterministic workflows on their own that actually worked 100% of the time, not when the agent felt like doing it. And so, which I know you're familiar with, Geoff, from your own experience.
Yep.
So the point is, like, there's a real lack of clarity right now on what the tools are actually good for, and I would argue that part of ASUG's job and part of Josh and my job, by extension, is to help with that because
Yeah.
because no one really knows at the moment. I would like to get back into the Reltio thing for a second. I think I've mispronounced your name 3 times now, but anyway,
I think we need a podcast. How do you say that word?
because I don't know how important the acquisition will prove because I tend to really need to see execution and integration. I'm very stubborn about that, as Josh knows from the tool chain discussions. But the point is, like, I think what it's trying to do is fascinating because so what we have here is we have the predicament of heterogeneous enterprises in the age of AI. And the predicament especially affects multi-vendor workflows from an agentic standpoint because my opinion, we could talk about it, is that that's not really very feasible at this point. It's mostly you have to really integrate carefully across vendors if you want to do that. But there's a different thing, which is making decisions across vendor data repositories. And that absolutely is possible, which is one reason why Foundation Capital screwed up a bunch of vendor stock prices by saying context graphs are a trillion dollar opportunity. What they were trying to say there is that a lot of enterprise vendors don't really have access to the broadest range of data that's needed to make decisions in the moment. And it's a very interesting criticism. Now, I didn't agree with everything Foundation Capital had to say on that, and that's a whole different discussion. But it's a fascinating time to revisit the context around everything. So with that in mind, when you look at the Reltio acquisition, what it's trying to do here, it talks about managing and governing structured and unstructured enterprise data from start to finish. And the vision is to strengthen BDC and accelerate it into enterprise-wide agentic AI by harmonizing data across multi-vendor environments, right? So this is the fascinating thing here. And what I think it will be interesting to find out, and they have these intelligent data graphs and all of that, but this is, I think, why SAP is drawn to this acquisition, is that SAP is realizing, to their credit, that an SAP-centric approach to decision-making around these tools is not going to be an effective moat, and it's not going to serve their business users well enough. And so I give them credit for grappling with this. Now, how easy will it be to put all this together? I don't know. The press release had some pretty glowing language about how it's going to be fully, this AI wonderland once these tools get integrated. Well, I hope that's the case, but I think they're tackling at least the right problem here.
So we've been trying to tackle this problem forever. I mean, master data management,
Yep.
it's as old as the relational database. And,
Yep.
and again, I'm going to go back to change management. We've all been in the room trying to reconcile, complex data structures across different individual silos in the organization. What does a customer record look like? And what does the catalog look like? And what is the bill of materials for the same product that's built in different plants in different parts of my organization? These are political, social, cultural problems to solve.
Existential crises
What?
inside most organizations, right, Josh? The conversations you're describing are, big time engaged, lots of people engaged, discussions, conversations, arguments, wars over some of these concepts internally in most organizations, right?
And this is my I use the term silo busting all the time because this is the structurally the problem of how do you realize all of this innovation we're talking about. And Jon said this earlier. I mean, you've got to build this harmonious, synchronous, unified organization, and this has always been the case for this. There is no VP of silo busting. There's just often a COO. There's always a CFO. There's someone who should be thinking this way, but that's not really their job. And in a way, we need to sort of find a way to universally create a job title called integrated, transparent, synchronous enterprise, and really make it stick, because that's a perception and the mindset that's needed to make this stuff work.
So, and the interesting thing about AI is that if you do it right, it can handle a much wider variety of data sources to solve these problems than what we've been able to in the past. But it doesn't solve the data cleansing problem. And Geoff, this gets back to the point that I think you have made again and again on these podcasts, is that why isn't AI helping us more with the grunt work around migration, data quality, and all of that? This is not just an SAP problem, by the way. This is an enterprise-wide problem. And I do think vendors need to shorten the gap there and attack these pain points. Now, granted, there's a limit to it because, as Josh points out, master data and customer record issues, for example, some of that really requires subject matter experts in their domains to identify what the data problems actually are with these records. And, so you can't just automate all of that out of existence. But I do think we're at a little bit of a crossroads here. And we could go one of two ways, because we can either use AI as a spark to re-engage in these conversations, or it's going to make fools out of us. And in Diginomica, we just did a big enterprise data health study. And here's a pull quote: enterprise data health is far worse than industry benchmarks suggest, and the market telling organizations to deploy AI faster is the last place they should look for honest answers. And I think that is the key here, which is, yeah, go ahead and accelerate your AI rollouts, but if you don't reckon with your enterprise data health first, then don't come back crying with disappointment, because it's not going to happen.
Jon, but you made a really important comment, which is, if the data is not right to begin with, which is what you said, if most of the enterprise data that's out there is of dubious quality to start, how could you possibly think that these AI tools are going to be able to navigate that, wallpaper over it, and make perfume out of it? It doesn't make sense. We're taking this massive shortcut, or assumed we can take a shortcut around that I think is going to prove to be a very wrong outcome, right? If the data underneath this isn't right and it's not clear, it's not consistent, to Josh's point a few minutes ago, master data isn't accurate, it says one thing, but it means the other, then the whole bedrock of this is shaky. And AI tools might be able to make it sort of look okay for a period of time, but then it's going to come crashing back down again.
So yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, just real quick, Geoff, I think it's a great question, but the reason I brought up Walmart and OpenAI, not to pick on Walmart too much, because they're hardly the only ones that have made these mistakes, is if Walmart, one of the savviest teams in the industry around this kind of stuff, can fall into this trap, then anyone can.
Oh yeah.
And I think it's because there's so much marketing behind the intelligence of these solutions out of the box. And there's so much stuff on every time you log on to LinkedIn, you see, look what I made this weekend. Your mind's blown. Go on YouTube. No job is safe. I just coded all this in my sleep. Woke up in the morning and it was done. Like, the point is, anyone can fall for it. And I think one of the benefits of these kinds of completely unhinged discussions is that maybe someone listening to this won't fall for it next time, because they're like, wait, yeah, maybe I should think about this, because it sounds really good sometimes to just jump into the solution part and not have to revisit the toil of these data problems. But the exciting thing would be to reframe the data problems in a new way, which is why I think this is not the year of AI results. This is the year of AI readiness. Take AI readiness by the throat here and build data solutions that work and notch some wins along the way. This is the game right now.
Right.
I
want to jump in just a bit with something. And, I said I don't know if I said this loud enough, but I have 3.5 big stories for 2026. And the half a story is the one I'm going to call it a half story, because I keep saying this every year. It's going to be the year of, and Jon always goes, yeah, I'm waiting too. And it's tool chain, right? Tool chain.
Oh no, the tool chain.
Woo! But I want to equate tool chain to a certain extent to and automation within the tool chain family of products, to automating programming. Because the nice thing about automating programming, as opposed to automating Walmart's back office with AI, is that believe it or not, it's programming is a finite and much more knowable universe than what Walmart's trying to do as an e-commerce. Similarly, implementation excellence is actually a place where you can point AI and look at how we historically implemented. There's some good data around that, and then do a better job. So I'm kind of excited, because a lot of these questions about how do I engage in change management around, let's start with data, can start actually, with what Signavio just in particular can do. And we've heard some interesting innovations coming down the road, John and I, that we can't really talk about how Signavio is going to enable some of this stuff. But fundamentally, there is a set of tools within the tool chain that are going to be much more automated, much more agentic ready. And because they're pointed at a very finite, knowable problem, one that has a certain fixed parameter and is gated around some very specific actions, you can actually do a better job looking at that, solving that problem with AI than you could with something that is infinitely complex like e-commerce. So I'm pretty hopeful there that we're going to see some really interesting changes coming out and things that customers can actually get their hands around and use.
Start with the high volume, low complexity stuff.
Say that again, please.
Start with the high volume, low complexity stuff. That
has good
fairly
data, right?
Fairly consistent advice over the years from all of us.
Yeah.
My quarrel has never been with the tool chain. It's been with whether the tools really line up in an integrated chain, and to what extent, is Signavio readily accessible to customers as opposed to a monetization exercise for SAP. But that's a longer conversation. I'm not going to disagree with the promise. Josh, you've kind of teased us now with the 3.5. You've given us one. You given us 1.5, right?
No, that was 2.5 because I talked about innovation. I talked about data excellence.
So what was the other one?
The third one is actually, we're going to see some changes around how SAP approaches the customer. And this is the Thomas Saueressig story.
Well, I wanted to get to this news because this was the other news item we have to hit on a little bit of news in our discussion. Right. So, okay, so let's knock this one up. So how do you see that?
So what we know is that Thomas is taking over, is the sales and service side. He's really going to be customer success the way it always should have been, which is not just sales success, but actual, end of the road. We got a product that's actually useful. And attacking, if you look at this, I mean, we all know this number. I put it in the story, my story for ASUG News. There's, for the sake of argument, $100 billion at stake in terms of the service opportunity in the SAP market. If SAP is doing $40 billion a year, there's easily a 2-to-1 ratio of service to software spend. And it's very clear this is what Thomas Saueressig's organization is going to try to capture more of. The best way to do this is not, SAP can't afford to throw resources to do it the old school way. That's insane. They're going to do it the new school way, which is to have a much more automated function that actually does lower the cost, lower the time to value, increase the opportunity for customers. So I think that, the thing that I find most interesting about this change at the top, at the board level is, we always felt that when the customer success, if customer success was only tied to a sales opportunity, not a customer success opportunity, it was a false prophet, to be very honest. Now we've got this opportunity to, if the metrics are right, it's not just going to be enough to make the sale. You're going to have to make the customer successful too.
Sales plus services plus support is a holistic offering to the customers under one umbrella that hopefully drives synergies and optimization and reduces customer confusion. Because for many of our customers, right, when we talk to them, okay, so where does the account executive come in? Where does the service team come in? What do I do about, support? So hopefully it cleans up a lot of that, which internally inside of SAP has a lot of hoops to jump through, and it's not a clear process internally. And if it's not a clear process internally at SAP, it certainly isn't working the customer lens. So I'm hopeful, Josh, to your point, that we as customers get a real good end-to-end experience versus a inconsistent herky-jerky experience.
Right. And I think I think the willingness is there. This is also a change management problem of the first order. And it's going to have to, this is all at the end of the day, all change in an organization, a sales-oriented software organization like SAP, all change can be measured by the change in the compensation plan for the for the field salespeople because their incentives are going to drive behavior. So it's real. So
Yep.
I got to see where this changes at that level, and that's why. So my third point was the promise, the hope that there's going to be changes around contracting, around how do you deal as a customer with SAP in a more holistic way. To your point, Geoff, that is really about a customer driven outcome. I'm optimistic that SAP is going to have to change how they contract in order to capture a greater percent of that total spend of that $100 million, while at the same time reducing what that $100 million would have been to something much lower that is favorable to the customer and still gives SAP, the boost they hopefully will earn.
Yeah.
Well, we are entering the home stretch. I have one other topic I wanted to ask the two of you about. Geoff, is there anything else on your mind that you definitely wanted to cover?
I think we've covered a whole host of things today, John. Yeah, I'm ready for your last piece.
Okay, so this is inspired by more ASUG Talks podcasts.
Uh-oh.
I really got my money's worth out of these podcasts.
I'm worried. I'm worried about what you've been rolling up.
Yeah,
One
listeners
of
can
them
see the live smile on these faces. He's saying.
one of them was a tidbit, and I've even lost track offhand at this moment of which podcast it was, but it was a pretty striking stat that in the last year, you picked up on a shift from 53% of customers still using on-premise deployments to 26% from those surveyed in this particular study. That's dramatic and interesting, and I don't think that's going to be the same across global footprint of SAP. For example, I think especially in Europe, I know those numbers are going to be higher. We can maybe talk with Jens about that at Sapphire from the German user group perspective. But the other thing I was really struck by was the podcast with Jan Gilg and talking up the public cloud a bit. And and I'm going to go back on something I kind of said earlier a little bit around SAP needs to bring an innovation through BTP to wherever the customer is at. I do believe that public cloud environments matter and that public cloud SaaS, as Jan Gilg asserts, is a better way to absorb innovation going forward. I believe it. And I know that, Geoff, you've talked about this in the past. And, so I think it's important right now to say that because there's such a down vibe right now on like, oh, why should I be on a modern SaaS platform? Well, I'm here to tell you, a modern SaaS platform is exactly where you want to be to consume AI and to build your data platform and to have your clean core and to acquire less technical debt. And so I think it's a coherent argument on SAP's part, and I just wanted to say that.
I 100% agree, John. I've said for a long time that I think that public cloud should be the destination for most customers. I recognize that that is a controversial thing to say. I recognize that the SAP product may not suit every single customer the way they need it to be suited to them. And those are challenges. But why I say that is because we as customers need to give back to SAP as much basic functionality as we can. While we can customize it to do whatever it is we want, it doesn't mean we should. And it doesn't mean that that won't have long-term ramifications. So we have to give back and hold SAP accountable for as much of this stack as possible, because then that should free us up to do the work that we talked about earlier in this podcast of innovation, experimentation, things that we can't get to today because we're so busy keeping the lights on for the custom code we've already written that maybe we sort of shouldn't have, but gosh darn it, it was just easier at the time. And now we are paying for all of that customization.
And I'm gonna amen that by saying, everything I said about innovation for ECC customers as being a big thing this year. It is incumbent upon SAP to also, as you drive that BTP-based innovation into your install base, you make sure they understand both the this is my contracting thing, the facility with which you're going to make it easy for them to move, but also the value that you think it's great today by extending through BTP from your ECC. Where do you get this stuff on a public cloud? And that's a story that needs to be told, and it needs to be told very carefully and very well, because everything you said, John, and Geoff is 100% correct. The end game has to be public cloud for the vast majority of customers, and it's going to be both a value and a cost story to tell. And it's SAP's job to articulate that well, and that's been a challenge for.
One of the things I think that this current generation of AI and vibe coding and being able to generate hundreds of thousands, millions of lines of incremental code, which I referenced at the top of this podcast from the New York Times, which I thought was a fantastic article, is just because I can doesn't mean I should. And I think that's one of the things that AI is going to bring back to us is it opens up a whole sea of opportunities that you couldn't ever really get to. Because if you weren't a hardcore developer, you just couldn't write it and it's complicated. And now if we've taken these new tools in AI and made that simpler, we're going to open up. I mean, there's people saying, hey, we can write applications for everything. Yeah, just what I need is more apps, right? I need more apps layered on top of other apps that don't do what I hope they would do, because that's why I brought the app to begin with. So now I don't think the answer to enterprise tech and all of our customers is to run more apps. I don't think that's the answer.
That's how we got in this customization problem to begin with. Let's customize the hell out of this thing because we think our customer record should look like this instead of like that. And for
So
what reason?
applying the same logic, just because I can run private cloud doesn't necessarily mean I should. And again, I want to be careful because there are really good reasons why you would go down a private cloud RISE implementation of SAP versus a public cloud. But long term, I want to hold, I think as a community, we should hold SAP accountable to bring us software that handles our business processes the way we expect it to, which means we have to be willing to give it back to them and say, you're supposed to do this better than we do. Please do this. Otherwise, I have to, and I can never get out from underneath it.
I think you said it.
So yeah, it's a pivotal year for SAP, I think, in Orlando, and we could share some thoughts on that. Maybe we can get another recording going when we're close to the event for that. But I did want to end with one thing in particular, and Geoff, I don't want to put you on the spot too much, so I think maybe this could be applied to all three of us, which is, since we all care about user groups, and Josh and I, want to serve customers as well, what can collectively we be doing better to do that in this moment in time? How can we come through and deliver? Because like I said, I think this is a lot for any individual customer to handle. And we have a little bit of an opportunity here, the three of us, to spend time on the big picture stuff. So how can we help? What should we be doing?
I think in times of high volatility, in times of high degrees of uncertainty, in times where it seems like all of this is overwhelming and I don't know which way is up, community is what you come back to. Safety exists in community. All of us collectively talking about these things, thinking through them, offering differing perspectives, telling each other it's going to be okay. Here's how I solved it. I don't believe you do this by reading more blog posts. I don't believe you do this by just hunkering down, late at night in front of your laptop and say, let me vibe code my way to a solution, or using AI as your therapist. I believe you come at this through the perspective of, I need to show up at ASUG chapter meetings. I need to listen to my peers. I need to say hello to them. I need to network with them. I need to do a better job understanding who around me can help me achieve the outcomes that I want. I think that's what this is about. So show up in Orlando for ASUG Annual Conference and Sapphire. Show up for ASUG Tech Connect. Show up at the 120 to 150 chapter meetings we do down the street from you. Those are where you're going to find, your safety in a very turbulent and unsafe world at the moment.
I don't know. There's nothing to add to that. I mean, that's it exactly. And I think that's a metaphor for life in general. Don't just believe what you see coming over the big or the small screen. Talk to your neighbors and your community, because that's where change can take place.
So I appreciate the fact when the three of us get together and have these unscripted conversations, we test each other. We listen to each other's opinions. We grow from that.
So let me add one thing to this.
Trust me.
Let me add one thing to this, because I think that was perfectly stated, Geoff. And I think the peer-based interactions are gold. One of my favorite things ever at events that I put on in my past was when I would see a group of customers that I kind of put them in the same room and unleash them. And suddenly they're like sharing war stories passionately amongst each other. And I'll just grab my organizers and be like, stand back. Our job is done. Let these people do their thing. This is the gold. This is thousands of dollars in consulting right here. But I do want to say that I think at this point in time, you should also, as a customer, be seeking out experts who challenge your point of view. And you may not always get that from your peer group as much. Sometimes you will, sometimes you won't. And so I think a diverse group of folks that speak to markets that you care about, bring them into your life one way or the other, and hopefully build relationships with them and make them part of your network, whether it's the people on this podcast or a different cast of characters that you want to listen to instead. You need people like that. And I would say from a project standpoint, two things. One is some expert to provide some viewpoint on your project that is not tied to your main consulting partner and has a different and not as much of level of interest in the status quo is hugely important, I think. And also cast a wide net when it comes to SAP partners, because there's a lot of innovative partners right now doing cool stuff that are not the usual suspects that are probably on your project now. When you go to the show, hit the show floor, meet with some of those people, be alert to the possibilities, because there's a lot of cool stuff happening. And so I would just add that to the community mix.
And that's the thing we could spend a whole podcast on.
Yeah, I think that was fantastic. Agreed.
Yeah, well stated.
All right. Well, I think we have a wrap. Thanks to all who joined. Thanks to you guys. And yes, we will be doing a few more of these in the coming months because there's so much happening. So we'll be back.
Yes.
Thank you.
Have a great week.
Bye all.